GM everyone. Welcome to a pegged edition of Pinto Town Hall. We are steadily oscillating above and below the value target, so life is good. We've got a pretty good crew here today. We're going to run the town hall similarly to how we've been running it recently, where we'll go around, hear from contributors, hear what they're working on, hear what they're thinking about, what's on their mind, and then we'll have an open period where people can ask questions, raise problems, raise concerns, share ideas. Really an open floor for people to talk. A town hall. And then if there's time, I'll share a little bit about what's on my mind, what I'm looking at in the protocol, and my interpretation of how things are going. So with that in mind, why don't we kick it to Frijo?
GM everybody. It's been a great week on the farm. So, say 60% of my time spent with Floyd
Hey, your
Rainweather.
microphone was very good when you came in, but then it kind of dipped off a bit. I don't know if you could fix that.
Yes, one sec.
No, I think it's better again.
Great. What UX? This week we had a great week on the farm. 60% of my time was spent with Floyd Rainweather, working out the new landing page. So I'll let him talk about what we've done there. And the remaining 40% was spent on protocol code. We're still on track with getting the convert bonus out. Uh, that will give people grown stock based on the time when they convert. So still chugging around there. No real updates on I guess content. I guess maybe to give a little bit more detail. We're merging in the changes we've had previously and just writing some final testing.
Awesome. Thanks for that update. Anything on your mind that's interesting to talk about at the moment? Anything you're watching in particular?
Yeah, I put a tweet out that I found it very interesting that someone, I think this is the first instance we've seen this on the farm, kind of saw, use the data from the tracker market to their advantage. For some context, I think we saw that the temperature this week went from 650 to around, I believe right now it's 698%. And what I found interesting is that if you look very deep, closely in the Pinto website, you can see that there was a massive queue of orders at 700%. Uh, and this guy or person must have saw the queue and underbid them by 2%, successfully kind of skipping the whole queue and letting them sell first, which I found very fascinating. I found it was awesome. It's interesting because it's unclear how much data we want to make public. Truthfully, the tracker data is public because due to constraints of the EVM, it has to be public. Uh, but interesting to see market dynamics play around that. And overall, that makes the Pinto model very efficient. One of the goals of the field is to try to issue debt as efficiently as possible, and this is just one of the many ways it does so. So really cool to see the incentives align in such a way that it does that.
Yeah, very interesting. And it's one of those things where, on the one hand, from a user's perspective, you may prefer that your tractor order were private, which is to say that there's no way for other people to know what you're bidding. But from the protocol's perspective, there is actually a lot of value in having people signpost the price at which they're willing to lend to the protocol from the perspective of, yeah, other people can now outbid or undercut the existing tractor orders, and in that way, you can have an efficient market for lending to the protocol. Very cool. All right,
Yeah, I guess
go ahead.
I guess the ideal middle ground here is that if there was a way where the global outstanding orders, like from a Pinto amount perspective, was shown to everybody, but individually their orders were private, that would be a pretty healthy middle ground where people can still extract information from a global state, but weren't able to see their state on an individual level. though that still still leads to information being leaked. But I think that's a step above what we have right now.
Totally. Current privacy tech in the EVM isn't really there yet, but yeah, I think that's going to change sometime soon. So something to keep on the back burner for future work. Definitely. All right. Why don't we swing it over to default juice? What type of juice we drinking this week, sir?
DM, default juice as always. So this week I continued to work on the beanstalk shipments. I thought I was about done with the logic on the silo payback and the burn payback contracts, and was about to begin some like pretty rigorous fork testing. So I was about to be blocked by Pinto Pirate actually on the exports or like the data from the beanstalk state at the time of the like Pinto deployment snapshot. But I had a chat with Frijo, and we felt like it would be very valuable to support claiming your unripe yield from your internal balance, just to be compatible with the upcoming Generalized Structure Marketplace. So now that the scope has changed, some logic on the silo payback contract needs to be modified. So while I wait for the data exports from Pinto Pirate, that's what I'll be working on.
Great. Thanks for that update. And is there anything you're thinking about with respect to the protocol as we oscillate here at Peg worth talking about? Anything on your mind?
Nothing crazy in particular. I'm watching the flows and how people opt to directly deposit in the silo versus deposit into S Pinto. So to give more context, like right now on S Pinto, you could get like 3x or like 2x the amount of stock. Compared to if you were to deposit directly to the silo, which is like very compelling. And that bonus, as more fresh deposits without a lot of grown stock get deposited into S Pinto, that bonus decreases. So while I would expect new participants who enter the protocol to deposit into S Pinto while this like stock arbitrage lasts, there's quite a few of them who just like deposit directly to the silo. So maybe we can do like some extra UI work there, or like some rephrasing on the S Pinto page to like reflect that you're gonna get like 2x boosted yield if you deposit into this thing versus in the silo. But then again, there's like other trade-offs there, such as you're 100% exposed to the price of Pinto, and you're also not optimizing for seeds. But yeah, it's a very interesting data point to keep in mind.
Yeah, it is. Thank you for highlighting that. I think it speaks to the fact that we're still very early, and there remain a lot of, albeit not super significant, inefficiencies in the system, where I would expect that as more people start to pay attention, and particularly if the system continues to mint, more people are going to pay attention to these nuances. And ultimately, I think you're right to highlight that it's not a one-to-one thing such that you're just getting double the stock. There's definitely a trade-off space there. But it's very interesting to see how even at this point in time where there is some minting occurring, people are not necessarily playing the game so efficiently to capture that. And this is where I think we've known firsthand through our experience, for example, introducing tractor in the field, that the system remains pretty inefficient. But in the past, we've had the thesis that the system is inefficient because of the friction of just doing things like sowing, for example, once we change the amount of soil. Whereas in this case, it does seem to be more of just an absolute inefficiency that even tractor improving the UX wouldn't necessarily fix. So to me, I do take that to be a data point that we're very early, and there's a lot more we can expect in terms of efficiency from the participants in the system as more people start to pay attention, and there's a financial incentive to pay attention more closely and play this thing really close to the efficient strategy. So Thank you very much for sharing that, Juice. I think you're totally right to be watching that and paying attention to it. All right, who should we swing it to next? How about Burr? What's up, sir?
GM. Yeah, so for me, nothing too crazy this week. I have really been putting my head down on getting this convert order book UI ready. I'm getting pretty close to a semi-testable version, and the goal is to have this out hopefully by next town hall, I think. And so yeah, just continuing to work on that.
Great. That'd be awesome if it's out by next town hall. Yeah, I think maybe next week's town hall there's going to be a lot of stuff dropping. Maybe also the landing page. Yeah, there's a lot of updates that have been in the kiln for quite some time that are almost ready, which is really exciting. I'll ask you the same question, Burr. Is there anything on the firm that you're watching or thinking about worth sharing?
You know, as I've been working on this convert order book UX, I've been thinking a lot about the leaf blower analogy that you talked about. I think it was a couple of years ago, and how like the balancing mechanisms work. And I think, especially related to the convert order book, it would be really cool to kind of see this kind of happen automatically. Whereas before we, relied on everyone paying attention 24/7. But I really feel like Tractor will enable the system kind of like level up in some sense in terms of like conversions. And so, yeah, I mean, nothing really too crazy, but just been thinking about the convert order book a lot. And so it's just one insight that I had.
Yeah, it's interesting. This is sort of related to what Frijo and I were just talking about around privacy being an interesting component of the game theory here, where it's like in the past, I've spoken about how the dynamic of like, well, why doesn't the protocol itself run an order book? And you could say the AMM is sort of an order book, but why doesn't the protocol just buy and sell at specific prices and target concentrated liquidity where it's like automatic conversions, if you will, in some sense? And the reason historically has been that if the protocol too transparently shares when it's going to convert or when there's a lot of depth and liquidity at particular ranges, that really does play out the game theory a bit too much and doesn't leave enough ambiguity in terms of where the bids and asks are in the order book, such that people that want to participate in the system but not even necessarily manipulate it, but just play the game in a way that where they know the price thresholds that are most meaningful, there's a risk there. And so I think one of the things that I'll be watching once we roll out the convert order book is the amount of liquidity, like the portion of liquidity that is participating in the Tractor order book. And I think there could come a point where if too much of the liquidity is participating in the Tractor order book, that actually might turn into a net negative thing for the protocol. But at the same time, and one of the reasons why we're still moving forward with the Tractor convert order book despite those risks is the fact that we've seen how there's a dramatic improvement in the efficiency of the system through an improved UX via Tractor. So yeah, I think this is actually one of the most interesting things to be paying attention to over the next couple months once we roll out this convert order book. So thanks for highlighting it.
Hey, Ben, could you explain to me why having too much liquidity on the convert order book is inherently bad or may be bad for the protocol? I didn't quite catch that.
Definitely. So it's like, well, let's say that everyone is willing to convert at 90 cents, for example. As the price goes from $1 or close to the value target down to the low 90s, when it comes to a bank run, like the game theory of a bank run, if everyone knows that the vast majority of liquidity, that the bid in the system comes at 90 cents, that creates a high level of concentration in terms of user activity around 90, where people that may otherwise, if there was no convert order book, such that the only data that people have is the AMM, and then there's a question around when are the converts going to come. It makes it such that there's more of a question as to how low is the price going to go, and then should I participate in the bank run or not becomes a much more individual question. Whereas if it's obvious because it's public that basically most or all of the liquidity or a significant portion of the liquidity is all going to convert at 90 cents, that creates sort of I don't necessarily want to use the phrase like a Schelling point, but it definitely creates a critical juncture in the system where if the 90-cent wall, if you will, is going to break, particularly if a lot of the liquidity has been used via converts at the 90-cent threshold, there's a potential for more people to exit once that convert threshold or those convert orders are eaten through. So it's not exactly it's a little bit more complex than that, because what converts are really doing is just removing liquidity from the liquidity pool on the Pinto side, such that it's not directly draining the liquidity from the pool. But what it is doing, if you have a significant concentration of convert orders in an order book, it's basically saying that there is a range at which you can safely expect to be able to remove a certain amount of liquidity from the protocol if you were going to exit. And so the risk return profile of staying in and not participating in a bank run really does change materially when there is that significant wall in the order book versus once that wall disappears. So there is a potential increase in risk in the system from the perspective of, previously everyone was operating under the assumption that there was this wall in the order book such that if I wanted to leave in size, I can leave in bigger size because there's all these convert orders out there. Whereas once those convert orders have been eaten through, they're no longer there. So now if I wanted to leave in the same size, it's reasonable to expect I'm going to get a significantly worse exit price. So although having the convert orders can create more stability, it also has the potential to create more volatility in the instance where there's more outflows than the convert orders can sustain, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, this is the argument on why Terra Luna failed with when Do Kwon tried to collateralize Terra, or I think Luna, where the stable token, uh, partially with Bitcoin, creating a wall. I wonder if it's just a UX issue where when someone sees a big bid, it doesn't register in their head that this is a this can theoretically be removed at any given time. That there's no guarantee that this wall will stay at 90 cents. Given that I think the main difference here is that this is intent based by the users, on the users of the farm. Anytime they can remove it, there is no guarantee here, that they will execute the convert order. I mean, this is a big issue, I think, in the current order books, that someone can manipulate the data, less so in a tractor order book, but more so in a convert order book, that they can just choose arbitrary prices and kind of fake the data. If you know what I'm saying. So I'm curious of how we can kind of prevent that and present the data in a way where it's meaningful for people to, create decisions on that.
Yeah, I maybe want to push back a little bit on the Terra point. For me, there's a difference between the model and like the second order user behavior around an order book or an expectation that there's a bid, even though in Terra's case, they were mixed. So as I understand what happened with Terra, Terra had this model where under the premise of the model, there was endogenous value created by the system. And this endogenous value derived itself from an equity token. And that was ultimately endogenous value is largely a social phenomenon, as we've talked about. And the issue, which I want to separate, is that when Do Kwon basically created this Bitcoin reserve, that actually said, well, actually, we're going to start to get a portion of our endogenous value from elsewhere. We're going to take our endogenous value and convert it into exogenous value. And that conversion, that shift, had quite a significant effect on the social organization of the people that were part of the Terra ecosystem, where they started to say and question, hey, if the founder of the system doesn't believe in the integrity of the endogenous value of our system, why should we? And so that was, to me, from a behavioral perspective, the thing that was playing out there was more of a rug on the faith that people had in the system design, because the founder publicly indicated through the purchase of this BTC reserve that he didn't believe in the design of the protocol and its source of endogenous value. That's different than, which is also something that played out in practice with Terra, the behavioral idea of, oh, well, now we have this bid, and once the bid of the BTC reserve has been eaten through, now the value source of the protocol has changed significantly. And so this is something that we've tried really hard, meticulously, to stay away from. There's a reason why we don't have any collateral in the system. But more than that, even in the case of this convert order book, there's no change in the source of value of the system. There's no exogenous value that is being used to derive the value for Pinto that gets dried up. It's more of a second order thing of just when do users want to use the liquidity. So you're right to bring this up from the perspective of, sure, if all of the liquidity is dried up because of converts, you're exactly right that from a behavioral perspective, it could have the same effect of, now there was all this liquidity, or there was all this liquidity, now there's not. But that's, to me, like a much smaller issue from a behavioral perspective in terms of magnitude of its effect on the integrity of the system than compromising people's faith or belief in the endogenous value source itself. Both are definitely relevant, but to me, the Bitcoin reserve was a much bigger mistake because it betrayed the faith that people had in the model, as opposed to the just the fact that the BTC reserve was dried up. Like, to me, the system was dead from the time that they gave up on the model, if that makes sense. It just ended up dying when the BTC reserve was dried up. If I'm making the distinction clear.
Loud and clear. Thanks for that. Curious, if you have any thoughts on the second part of my comment, where we talked about the lack of a guarantee, how we can make that more intuitive for the user when they're making these bids. Like you said, people may see a wall and use that as information. How do we prevent the disinformation where someone can just place bids just to place bids?
Yeah, this is in markets we call it spoofing, order spoofing, order book spoofing, and this is a classic market manipulation technique where large players fill up the order book, particularly a little further away from the mid price. And then when the market starts to move towards these larger orders, they pull out the liquidity, and it turns out, oh, there was no bid actually there. On the one hand, that's not really something that is easy to solve or resolve. I mean, you can do interesting things like charging people a cancellation fee, although I think that has the potential to discourage people from participating in the market in the first place in an honest or genuine fashion. Because now it's like, well, hey, if I change my price, now I'm going to get charged for it. So it's not super clear how to do that. And then there's more like privacy-based solutions that you can implement. For example, to not light up the order book, as we say in like traditional terms, where a lit order book is one where everyone can see the depth of liquidity and the spread of liquidity and see the actual order book. Whereas things like dark pools, for example, make it such that no one can see the order book. So people are trading into the order book, but they can't see it, and therefore this ability to spoof is generally removed from the system.
Fascinating. I do have one more question regarding these, tractor order books, but I want to hold back and get the rest of the contributors to share their stuff before proceeding.
Great. Yeah, but we should have time to go through that. All right. Why don't we kick it over to Floyd Rainweather?
Yo, what's up, guys? GM, everyone. On my end, pretty much the whole week has been heads down working on the landing page. It's been a pretty fast-paced process of gathering feedback, implementing that feedback, and gathering more feedback on these changes. And I want to shout out Frijo for running point on getting all this feedback and compiling everything. And he's been a huge help, even help with some of the features in the landing page. So huge shout out there. And that's about it, really. Just working on the landing page. Right now, I'm shooting to have everything ready for review by Tuesday. But we'll see what happens, but shooting for Tuesday at the moment.
Ben, if you're speaking, you're muted.
Oh, apologies. Thank you, Frio. I was saying thank you, Floyd. I'm going to ask you the same question. Is there anything on your mind happening on the farm you want to talk about?
Personally, I'm just excited to be hovering around PEG and seeing people, seeing the vibe be very positive and people excited for the future. So yeah.
Awesome. Thank you very much. All right. We are going to kick it to Pintocito.
GM, can you guys hear me well?
Yes.
What's up, guys? Excited to be around the value target. Excited to continue to produce some content. We got some interesting stuff cooking. And if you've noticed, we've been a lot more active on X. So what I'm looking at is our follower count and our engagement. So to give you a little color, since I think 2.5 weeks, our follower count is up about 5%, on the order of over 50 new followers, getting us close to that 1,000 mark. So trying to continue to both release high leverage, high fidelity content, as well as just a constant stream of information about what's going on the farm. So I've been lucky to collaborate with some of the other contributors on that. Very exciting.
Awesome. Yeah, it's been fun chefing some of these articles together. I'm also very excited for some more content that we're going to be putting out soon, including like a Pinto, like like a main article that people can cite when people are asking for some sort of shareable content that doesn't necessarily explain how the model works, but more goes into really justifying why Pinto exists. So expect that article sometime soon, folks. And then we're also chefing up a couple other pieces that explain the stock system, explain the field, and so on and so forth. Thank you very much, Pintocito.
Yeah, I
All
mean,
right.
just to add a little bit of color to the main article front, it's like there is so much philosophy here that goes back to the beanstalk days and beyond. And so I feel like it's our job to get people excited about it and to let them in on the ideas at a high level, to return to the important conversations about what's wrong with the current monetary system and what's right with it, and what the vision of Pinto really represents. I think it's something that's very unique within the space and something that is very inspiring to me. So I feel very fortunate to work on it and hopefully get people to understand. And yes, people need to understand the mechanism at some point, which I'm looking forward to helping break down. But to try to speak at a high level in a way that is tangible that people can hopefully relate to and feel like they can be part of this story, this experiment together, is something that is exciting to me. So grateful to be working.
Awesome. Thank you for that. All right. So before I kick it over to BMC, who has recently started to contribute, I want to tell people to navigate to a new tab on the website. Under the home navigation bar at the top, you will see a question mark. And if you go and check out the question mark, you will see a hint of what is to come. So maybe people just take a second if you're on your computers or have your wallet connected. We've been thinking about how to get the community more unified and excited, and something that had a really profound effect on the Beanstalk community. And we saw that earlier when when Silo Chad hopped in. He was still rocking his Bean FT, and so something that we've been cooking up are a fun NFT collection. So if you go to the question mark, which will take you to pinto.money/collection, you'll see just a little tease of what is to come. So we hope to formally drop that in the near future. But yeah, people can go to the collection page, and if you have a wallet that's been actively participating in the system, you should see a little image here that should get you pretty excited. Pretty soon we're all going to have PFPs. So I think that is a good time to yield to BNC, who's been chefing this stuff up. Obviously, don't give too much away, sir. But tell us a little bit about what you've been up to.
Sounds good. What's up, guys? I've been helping out for around 2 weeks, doing some stuff, like behind the scenes, doing a lot of work with Pinto on the social side, and spending most of my time, honestly, on this NFT collection. And I'm excited to see how the entire community reacts to it. Some of the artwork, we're really trying to reward the community for sticking around, especially after we got back to PEG. So yeah, excited to see where this goes, and hopefully we can get back some of the excitement that the BNFTs really created back in the day. Yeah, thank you, Ben.
Awesome. Thank you for that update, BNC, and great to have you contributing. All right, I see we have the one and only roast beef here, the main tractor operator on the farm. Curious, sir, if you want to say hello and share anything about what you've been cooking up. Or should I say mowing down?
Howdy. I've just been around doing stuff. But very, very nice to see everything working, so.
Awesome. I think things are working quite well in many ways, thanks to your tractor operation. So thank you, sir. All right. So I think we've heard from all the contributors that are here at the moment. So with that in mind, we will open up the floor. Frijo, I know you said you had at least one more question. We've got some time here, so if anyone has questions, comments, thoughts, opinions, FUD, now is a great time to share.
Yeah, one question I was thinking of is with Tractor, one of the cool things is that you can submit multiple orders with the same collateral. With 100 Pinto, for instance, you can express different prices to convert with different bonuses. I'm curious on how we show this on the UI in the best way possible. Currently as we have it, that we're going to do it such that each order is is as if it's its own individual order. But it becomes very complicated now that you have, let's say 10 orders with, one set of collateral. So curious if you've thought about this a little bit more.
So let me just understand the question better. Maybe I just want to understand. So your question is within a single tractor order, I can take my deposited Pinto and give me a couple examples of what I can do with it. I can place orders to sow and I can place orders to convert. Is there anything else?
No, but even within the convert, you could say, I want to convert at 90 cents with a 10% bonus or 80 cents with a 20% bonus, and so on and so forth. So you can view a lot of orders in just one, with one Pinto.
Yeah, that's a really fascinating question. On the one hand, I think that this has to do, it's a little bit hard to give a general answer because it has to do with the specific order book. Like one of the features of this convert order book, as you sort of suggested, is it's not a unidimensional thing where you'd have like just price and amount as you would in a traditional order book, two-sided order book, if you will. But here you have price, amount, and then you have this other factor, which is a bonus. And so as soon as you get into a multi-dimensional order book, and then you layer in the fact that you can actually have, the same value at multiple points because of this multi-dimensionality of the order book, that's like two orders of complexity that are new here compared to a traditional order book. And I do want to just digress for a second and say this to me really speaks to the level of complexity of the system that is being built at this point and where we are as a protocol, where it's like, these are things that don't really exist in traditional finance or even in DeFi. And it's hard to accurately represent this stuff. So I know Burr has been chefing up like a V0 of a two-dimensional order book, which is pretty interesting, and I'm excited for people to see it and play around with it. But then when you layer in the additional complexity of how do you indicate to people that this this liquidity is actually used other places, the first thing that comes to my mind is like to use some sort of color scheme. However, I could see that getting pretty out of hand if it was like done in a way, for example, that every order that had multiple uses of the same capital, if you assign like a different color to that order, I can imagine that would get pretty complex pretty fast if we were in a place where there was a lot of usage. So then I think maybe we try something simpler where it's like orders are either unidimensional or maybe it's not unidimensional, it's still multidimensional, but like single use orders, if you will, that have one color, and then multi-use orders can be indicated as such with another color. And then maybe it's like for each additional use, instead of doing it individually by order, you could have color be used in a way to indicate like the number of times that the capital in the order has been used. And in that way, you sort of get a natural mapping to understand, well, is this capital just here, or is this capital in one other place and two other places, et cetera, et cetera. So I can't say I've given this the level of thought that it deserves in order for us to do like to say this is good enough. It's been thought about enough. But ultimately, a lot of the way that we try to build this stuff out, given the complex nature of it, is to start somewhere and to iterate in production with a lot of this stuff based on how the feedback that we get and our experience using the thing as it's live. So that probably is sufficient to start, but hard to imagine that's the best that we can do in the long run.
Totally. Yeah, interesting to see what we come up.
Thanks, Frijo. So again, the floor is open. If there's things on people's mind, things people want to talk about, questions, comments, Bud, anything, the floor is open. Going once. Going twice. All right, so I'm going to step in and talk a little bit about what's on my mind and what I'm watching. I do want to say I'm particularly jazzed to have a new PFP once we drop these NFTs. Very exciting, personally. I remember the thrill of the BNFT days, and excited to put a face to the Pinto community, if you will. I'm very excited to hear what people think. When we talk about the protocol, I think it has to be said that the protocol regularly oscillating above and below the value target is really exciting and meaningful from my perspective. And even if you look at over the past month, if you will, since the protocol reached its value target again when we had that $1 million buy or so, that was July 20th. So we're coming on this week. It'll be a month since then. And the protocol has still had some volatility. Like once after that big buy, it still dipped back into like the high 70s, low 80s. But then it did really return to its value target, call it on the 22nd. And since then, we have had some dips into the low 90s. But for the most part, the volatility has been quite low. And there have been regular oscillations above and below the value target. And to me, that's very encouraging. I think another data point that I'm excited about is the liquidity. The liquidity has slowly started to rise again. I think in large part that's due to the fact that the crypto market as a whole is up. But you can really see a slow, steady increase in the liquidity of the system. And that is complemented, that complements quite nicely the slow and gradual increase in supply that we've been seeing during these oscillations. So for me, just looking overall, this is a really exciting time to just be logging data. And in particular, if you look at the history of Beanstalk, before you had any major growth cycle in Beanstalk, and obviously history is no indication of what will happen in the future in systems that are alive like this. But the precedent is that typically after the system returns to its value target, there's a month or two or three where the protocol is oscillating above and below its value target regularly before there's another big buy that really sends the system over and into a growth cycle. So that, just the fact that we're logging solid data and regularly oscillating the protocol across its value target is pretty meaningful from my perspective. And I'm encouraged by how this is going. One chart that we added to the data page recently was this crypto market performance chart. And I have to say, I get a lot of joy out of seeing the market oscillations or volatility of all of the assets that there's liquidity against, and seeing that Pinto is relatively low volatility compared to it. So the truth is there's a lot of encouraging data and reason to be excited that the model is working pretty well. I saw a tweet from an old Beanstalk participant, like reposting a tweet from like January where they said, we'll check on this protocol in a couple months. And they checked back and they're like, I thought this thing was going to go the same way of Beanstalk. But look at it, it's working. And I would push back a little bit on, going the way of Beanstalk being a bad thing. I think that protocol has logged some pretty promising data as well. But I think it speaks to the fact that the way Pinto is performing really speaks to people and is getting people excited that maybe this model can work and maybe it is worth giving things a second try. And so when we talk about the system and like the content that Pintocito and I have been crafting up, a lot of it is to create the conditions in which people can, in a way that feels rigorous to them and feels legitimate, reconsider what's going on and giving this thing another look. So for me, something that I've been very encouraged by as well is the pod rate coming down. If you look at the pod rate, it was at about 380% before we reached the value target again about a month ago. And since then, it's come down to the low 360s. And this, when you think about deleveraging, that is the name of the game. And one of the things that the original Beanstalk system got wrong was the way that it issued debt, even when the protocol was back at its value target. And this is something that we fixed shortly before the exploit. That was one of the main things that got the system to start to deleverage in the first place. But it's really great to see that the way that the soil issuance is done, which has been upgraded quite significantly since then, is doing it in a way where, on the one hand, as Frijo was saying earlier, we continue to get price discovery in the field, where the temperature has been going up and down from the high 800s down to 650 or so, slightly less than that, now settling in around 700%. But throughout this whole process, even as the pod line has shrunk a bit and then come back up and then shrunk a bit more, the pod rate itself has been more consistently coming down. So when we talk about the health of the system, the liquidity is slowly coming up, the debt is slowly coming down. Given that the debt level and the liquidity level, other than price, are the two main indicators of health of the system, it's quite encouraging to see. Like, ultimately, nothing super exciting in terms of like a major growth cycle or anything like that. A major debt repayment has happened. But to me, there's a lot of beauty in the slowness of how the system is working. There's just a chugging along here, logging really strong data. And again, none of this is an indicator that the protocol works ultimately or that this is definitely going to work. But for me, like in the trenches, if you will, these are the data points that lead me to believe that we are on the right track. And so to just see, even with minimal minting happening, even with not a huge amount of debt getting paid off, the fact that the conditions of the system are improving quite significantly, this is meaningful data from my perspective. I think not to get too deep into the technical weeds here, but I think that the improvement to the cultivation temperature that we put out a little while back, that's been a major success. This was the bug related to the tractor integration into the soil, or the field, I should say. And bug is probably a strong word, but these edge cases that we were hitting that led to not really enough soil getting issued, it seems like the fix that we implemented for that has worked quite well. So I look around and it's like, this thing is in a decent spot, and I'm excited to see what happens if we get a big bid, and the system starts to grow. I'm excited to see what happens from there. One other thing I've been paying a bit of attention to is this pod market. It seems like there's not a lot of liquidity still in the pod market, but people are placing some bids. They're not that many. Like, I see people are only bidding a couple pods, so it's not like there's a lot of bids in the secondary, but we do have a lot of offers on the secondary. I would expect at some point for this stuff to start to get snatched up, and that might be one of the advanced indicators that there might be a bid coming. If I were a new participant in the system, I would probably be checking out the pod marketplace as a way to get increased exposure beyond just bidding the spot. So something to watch there. Like right now, we still don't have a big bid, but that could change. If there was a bid in the pod marketplace, that would be an indicator to me that maybe there's more demand coming. So those are a couple things on my mind. I see a couple more people have come into the town hall while I've been speaking. So going to open up the floor again here as we have a couple minutes left to see if there's anything on people's minds that they want to ask about, talk about, et cetera, et cetera.
Hey Ben, what's the plan for marketing? How are you guys planning on getting new people into the system?
Well, ultimately, we really do believe that at this stage of the game, organic growth is essential. And so from our perspective, the best thing that we can do is to put out content that really speaks to the quality and rigor of the system and hope that it starts to get more distribution. I've been doing a little podcast. I was on Leviathan News recently. and I guess it's Leviathan is the podcast, where we were live on Twitter and hoping to do more speaking engagements like that. Just had a meeting with Pinto and Stable Summit earlier this morning to plan future events with them. And they obviously have a really meaningful platform in the stablecoin space. So we're very grateful to them for sharing their platform with us. I think we're going to do something pretty meaningful at Dev Connect in Argentina. We're thinking about doing a side event with them in Singapore as well. So to me, it's a combination of continuing to put out authentic content, particularly content that has the ability to get better distribution. Like the Terra article that I put out got over 2,000 views, which I think is by a pretty wide margin the most viewed thing that we've put out so far under Pinto. And hoping to put out really strong content like that gets people engaged again. So it's really a question of how do we create a grassroots thing. At the same time, what we've seen in the past with Beanstalk is the best way to get new people into the system is to just be growing and have very high APYs. But frankly, high APYs are not a great way to get people into the funnel from the perspective of getting people that are highly aligned with the system and people that are going to stick around and participate in the long run. So it's a fine line between growing just to grow and growing in a way that has real sustainability and organic demand built into it. So at this point in time, particularly given the health and demonstrated stability of the system, I find myself erring more on the side of favoring organic growth and slow and steady winning the race. But we do want to attract more people to the system. So it's not like a binary, we only want to put out super dense content that it's pretty hard to digest. We do want to make it more palatable and more digestible for people so that we can reach a larger audience. But I think a lot of this happens organically and naturally just by being out there, putting out the content. That's one of the reasons why we've been putting out more of the content from the main account. And I'm hopeful that over time we'll see a more active community springing up on Twitter that can really get the message out there and amplify the stuff that we're putting out. So I don't think it's going to be a straight line between here and popularity. But instead, I'm interested in carving out a unique path where we are able to pick up a lot of crypto aligned and curious people along the way that can form the basis of a really strong community here.
Gotcha. Thanks for the answer, big dog.
Of course. Thank you for the question. All right, we're running into the top of the hour here, so going to leave it open for just another minute, see if we have one or two other questions before we wrap up. All right, so we're running into the top of the hour here. Thank you, everyone, for coming. Sorry for the last minute change to the town hall this week, but we are a flexible group, so people appreciate very much people showing up despite the change in time. So thank you, everyone, and we'll see you next week. Peace out.
Peace. Everybody.